And it kind of, I was trying to forget all that stuff about university, and actually the things I was saying there, the folks at our table, I remember the first calculus exam I got back, I got 13%. And Carl Pauly was sitting beside me and he started laughing. He said, "What the hell's the matter with you? I got 11. So, try to forget those things. In the world I live in today, your training problem, the way I'd analyze that is, the whole thing's a disaster and everybody's going to get sued that had anything to do with it. So anyway, good evening everybody, and welcome back to Waterloo. It is really good to see everyone here. These are, it's kind of interesting how, I don't know about you, but I always, Kevin sends me all these emails and the guilt starts to build about, I gotta get back to Kevin. Jesus, I gotta get back to Kevin, right? And one of the things I want to start with this evening is recognizing the reason we are all here tonight is our man Kevin.
Yes.
Right? And Kevin once again worked tirelessly to not only organize the reunion, but also was persistent enough to get us to pay attention to things like registering, actually getting the right date in our calendars. And Kevin, for your months of effort and ending patience with unresponsive people like me, thank you so much. And we already gave him a round of applause, but let's give him one more.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And not saying that Kevin's an exception, but let's face it, I'm not sure any one of the rest of us would have made it happen. All right, so thank you, Kevin. So looking around the room, one thing's obvious, that none of us have changed a bit since 1990. And so I'm going to work on the philosophy that we all agree that that's the case, that will prove that old adage that if you repeat a lie often enough, it becomes a truth. And to show you an example of how we haven't changed, I found my frost shirt. And it fits perfectly. You ever take a foot on either side? Anyway, between us, we haven't changed a bit. So I'm not 100% sure why Kevin asked me to speak again tonight. It was kind of late, so I have to assume that he asked the rest of you first and you all said no. Or that I didn't respond to him until about 10 days before the event, and I apologize for that again, Kevin. Anyway, he did mention that perhaps since I'm currently chairing the U of W board, that I could give a bit of a brief update on the state of the Union of Waterloo, and I'm going to try to do that. And I'm going to be the first to say it's hard because, my God, there's a lot happening at the University of Waterloo. It is a much different institution than when we were there. At any one time, there's about what I would call 50,000 people in the Waterloo community between faculty, staff, and students, and that. Like it's a massive organization that really has a global reach now. So I wanted to title these remarks U of W, the good, the bad, and the ugly. However, I never like to end on a negative note. So cleverly, I'm going to use a different title, U of W, the ugly, the good, or the ugly, the bad, and the good. So let's start with the ugly. And there is some ugly stuff going on in post-secondary education right now, particularly in Ontario and quite frankly, most of North America. Over the past 10 years, the public perception of the importance of universities has dropped significantly. Like, I mean dramatically. So Boston Consulting, Abacus Data, all these different groups, they do polling, and the average person in the street doesn't think universities are that important, okay? And that's a sad reality right now. And so the problem with that is, as most of us know, politicians today of all stripes at all levels of government, they pay attention to and invest in issues that poll well amongst people, okay? Whether they're a good idea or not, it's all about the poll. And if you're not at the top of the voters list, well, you either get ignored or, quite frankly, get cut. And so the result has been a series of moves by successive provincial and federal governments. And again, I am not a political guy. I'd sooner saw my leg off with a rusty saw than be in politics. But all governments, you know, they've seen the trend that post-secondary education isn't all that important. And so there's been a 10-year period that has created a sustainability crisis in post-secondary education. And so what's happened, and it's a bunch of different things, done by a bunch of different governments, that sort of thing, but just to give you an idea, some of the factors that have created this crisis include, we have a 5-year tuition freeze that has been enacted in Ontario, okay, for domestic students. You'll probably have read about the significant restrictions on the number of international students, which needed to be done, but unfortunately was done in a way that it almost eliminated the international students coming to Canada, because they don't trust the Canadian system anymore, because they had a number of students that came, they were in their 3rd year and their visa for the 4th year got denied. So that gets back to everybody in their country, and they go, well, I don't want to go 2 or 3 years to Canada and then find out I can't do my 4th year. Significant restrictions on domestic students were allowed to enroll, so the government doesn't want to pay too much, so they say, you know, you have to keep the enrollment to a certain level. The reduction of the operating grant, which is the money that the province gives to the universities to operate. In the time I've been on the board, when I started, the province paid for 54% of the operating budget. Today it's 26.
Wow.
Whoa.
You know, that's big money.
Yeah.
Big. And there's also been very significant reductions in research funding from the federal government. And I could continue with a long list of other factors, but I think you get the point. The sources of revenue in post-secondary education have been cut dramatically while the costs continue to increase. And even the worst of us in business can kind of figure out, if your revenue keeps shrinking and your costs keep going up, that's not a real recipe for success. And it's put a lot of institutions in severe financial trouble. And in fact, for the first time in Canadian history, we had a university go bankrupt a few years back, Laurentians. Now, to be fair, they weren't exactly the poster child for a well-run university. You know, they did a lot of things that you know, caused their own troubles, but still, you might in the next 2 or 3 years see another institution or two actually have to file for bankruptcy. So we find ourselves in a position that in Ontario, we now fund universities at approximately 50% the rate of all other provinces, the average of all other provinces. And so, you know, think of every other province in Canada, and they fund almost double what we do in Ontario. And again, this is not a commentary on any particular government. This has happened over successive governments over many years. It took a whole lot of policy changes, but it's kind of a cumulative result that I'm talking about. And those other provinces that are funding at double fund at roughly 50% of other similar jurisdictions like the United Kingdom or Australia. So like, we're really behind the rest of the world. So that's the ugly part in the ugly, bad, and good. And the bad news is, like at Waterloo, we're not immune to those factors, right? They are significantly affecting operations at Waterloo, although I will say this, we have more reserves and less debt than most institutions, so we are much better able to weather the storm than most institutions. But to put things in perspective, if the conditions were the same as in 2015, 10 years ago, Waterloo would have, and just the same, no increase, just the same it was in 2015, Waterloo would have 250 to 300 million more in funding annually.
Wow.
And on a budget of 950 million, that's like 35% of the budget. So that's what, as a board, as an institution, the kind of magnitude of thing we're trying to deal with. So we now are projecting for this year a $40 million deficit. If we had the same conditions as 2015, we'd have a $200 million surplus to reinvest in students and world-changing research and building, one of the greatest institutions in the world. And I know money is limited and that sort of thing, but I think we're being very short-sighted and not investing in post-secondary education. We see what's happening south of the border. I don't think we want to go that direction. The most successful countries in the world are pouring billions into post-secondary education, and they understand that is where disruptive technology comes from, that is where the greatest talent comes from, that is what drives prosperity, productivity, and all those things in the long run. So if there's one thing you can do, talk to your neighbors, your friends, and if you ever run into a politician and just say, you know what, post-secondary education is really important. We need to take it seriously. And when we're dealing with things like our geopolitical instability and trade wars and that sort of thing, the thing that makes us resilient to that is going to be the talent, the productivity, all those great innovations that come out of post-secondary institutions. Now, we are going to be able to balance the budget over the next 3 years. It's going to require reducing student intake numbers. It's going to require staff and faculty reductions and a significant reduction in research infrastructure and capital projects. But we're going to be just fine, okay? Waterloo will be fine, so don't worry about that. So where's the good news? That's all the ugly and the bad. Well, as I said, Waterloo is one of the more resilient institutions in the province. And despite the cutbacks, we're actually embarking on a new long-term strategy plan called Waterloo at 100. And if you're wondering, why are you calling it Waterloo at 100? Well, Waterloo will be 100 years old in 2057. And so we're planning for the next 30 years. By the way, I expect to see you all at the 100th anniversary. So keep up that fitness stuff, that sort of thing. And what's interesting is, I work in the world of business. In the business context, setting a 30-year strategy just would seem absurd.
Yeah.
It would seem absolutely ridiculous because, well, we're going to be here 30 years from now. There's so much going to change in 30 years. But what's kind of fascinating about working in the university environment is universities last for centuries. Some of them last for millennia. The University of Waterloo is going to be here 300 years from now. That's kind of a really weird concept, but you have to think on a much more longer term basis. And so, what we've done with the strategic plan for 30 years from now, we're focusing on what makes Waterloo what Waterloo is. And we are a very unique institution. We are a globally recognized research-intensive university. At the same time, we're renowned for its entrepreneurship and innovation, all the spin-off companies. And we also happen to provide the world's premier work-integrated co-op program at scale, and it is second to none. Not even close. We're the biggest experiential learning institution in the world by far, and everyone tries to copy us. And one of the things that Waterloo does well is taking on some of those big, complex challenges facing humanity and actually coming up with solutions, not just sitting around thinking about it. And that's a big difference. So to do this, we kind of had to try and think about how do we frame this in some way that we can possibly, come up with a strategy. And so smarter people than me came up with sort of 5 strategic pillars that we call futures. And the whole idea is we're looking into the future, and what does the future look like in these 5 different categories. And what's really significant is we came to the realization that these sort of deep, discrete columns of expertise don't work anymore. If you're going to solve big challenges, what you have to do is you have to have interdisciplinary cooperation. there has to be engineers, there has to be scientists, there has to be humanities, there has to be all these kind of things to solve these really big complex problems. So all of these pillars are basically designed to have all the faculties involved and everyone contributing to them. So I'll try and go through them really quickly, and hopefully they make some sense. It's very hard to explain this plan in a couple of minutes, but so our first pillar, for instance, is economic futures. And in short, this strategic pillar is about addressing some of the fundamental challenges in the Canadian economy. We have historically low productivity in Canada right now. It's unfortunate but true. We have a shortage of skilled workers. We have a big shortage of highly skilled professionals. Obviously, we have geopolitical and trade instability and vulnerable supply chains, that sort of thing. We need to accelerate technology adoption. And so, what our goal is to try to look at it and say, what can Waterloo do to help build an economy that benefits all Canadians and provides an opportunity not just for a few at the top, but for everyone? How do we increase things like productivity and opportunity? And again, it's going to involve engineering, it's going to involve math, it's going to involve, and we have specific teams that are focused in this regard to how do we drive economic prosperity. The second pillar is technological futures. You're all aware of how fast technology is accelerating, but the issue is not only do we have to harness the power of advancements in things like AI, but we have to be really careful about the impacts of, like, not just the positives, but the negatives. Artificial intelligence will be in just 10 years. Honest to God, when you talk to the researchers, it's like science fiction. The world will be such a different place in 10 years. So we're going to need the talent that can work with these systems and harvest the benefits, but we also are going to have the talent and the policy people that can regulate these as well, because there's going to be a lot of inherent challenges. And so we're looking at both sides, the benefits and the challenges on technology. Third pillar is sustainable futures, and as you would suspect, it has a lot to do with environmental well-being, but also societal well-being. I mean, global climate change is a huge threat to the collective future. Interestingly enough, UW is one of the few faculties of the environment in the world. Don't know how many of you knew that, but you can count on two hands the numbers of faculty of environment in the world. So we're looking at how do we address these threats, so we can ensure basic necessities like preserving biodiversity, simple things, what seems like simple things, but having enough clean drinking water. Canada, we're the most blessed country in the world with fresh water. Every other country in the world has a drinking water problem, and it's going to be a real big problem in the future. It's going to be a big problem for the United States. If any of you know the Rio Grande system in the U.S., through what I can only describe as craziness, they allotted the water to the different states, and because they couldn't come up with an agreement of who got what, they allotted 149% of the water of the Rio Grande, and now it doesn't even reach the ocean anymore because it gets used up ahead of time. We need to have a better way of thinking about those kinds of things. We need to figure out a way to grow enough food in the right places in the world for the right people to feed everyone. Fourth pillar is societal futures, and this is best way I can describe this, in a simple person's terms. It's about information and it's about knowledge. And today, information and knowledge is so powerful, both in a positive and negative kind of sense. We need to develop solutions to address a lot of these forces that are changing. So we have things like shifting geopolitical relations, we have declining trust in democratic institutions, and we have a huge problem with misinformation. And I can tell you, when you look at the advancements in AI, misinformation is going to become a really, really big issue. We have to have systems to manage that. We also have we need systems that share knowledge, share intellectual property. The most prosperous nations in the world intentionally do not share knowledge and do not share intellectual property. And that is why there is such a gap between between the prosperous nations and the less prosperous ones. And we have to think about how do we share that information to transform things. And we really need to counter these trends towards polarization and isolation, and we have to really make efforts to advance the greater good. And I was talking to some of the folks tonight, just saying on the board, one of the things I've tried to do is, I like to have good, healthy debate. I like to see an exchange of different ideas, and I like to see it where people can have respectful differences, and you don't have to be in my tribe and I still like you, right? You can have a difference of opinion and I'm not gonna hold it against you, and we don't have enough of that in the world. We need to have constructive debate and dialogue.
Even if you're cheering for the Panthers?
What's that?
Even if you cheer for the Panthers?
There is a place for Panther fans.
It's not wrong. It's just not good. It's not wrong.
You can disagree with them, but you need to respect them.
We respect them.
So the last one is health futures, and I want to do a little bit deeper dive on this one because it provides an example of how this big high-level notional stuff gets transformed into reality, because it's all kind of airy-fairy up to here. So we are literally going to look at how we redesign our healthcare system in Ontario and Canada, mainly designed to improve outcomes for patients. And for those of us that have had family members or ourselves have had experience with the healthcare system, there's good, but there's also some things that need addressing. So we have three goals. We want to improve outcomes for patients, we want to reduce costs, and we want to increase the economic benefit of medtech related advancements in Canada. And we have a really unique opportunity right now in front of us. We just signed an agreement in the last couple of weeks to locate the new regional hospital on our North Campus. So up in the David Johnson Research Park, we're going to build an innovation hospital like Ontario and Canada has never seen. And we have a really unique partnership with the local hospitals, who, by the way, merged, which was incredible because we had a Catholic hospital and a non-Catholic hospital, and that's never happened in Canada, where they decided to come together. And we cross-appointed people with the university and with the hospitals to drive this new network that we're building to basically build a completely different hospital system. So rather than a traditional teaching hospital or research hospital, we think of the University Network in Toronto and places like that, which by the way do fantastic work. This facility is going to be one where medical innovations of all kinds can be tested very quickly, very cheaply, and we can go through clinical trials in a very efficient manner. You may be unaware of this and you're thinking, well, what the hell is Waterloo doing in the healthcare area or in medicine? We're not really in medicine, but Waterloo currently has approximately 300 faculty members and a whole fleet of researchers working with those faculty members working on health tech related technologies. We have kind of the same faculty complement that a lot of universities with a medical school have that are working on med tech related things. By the way, we also have more business professors and entrepreneurship professors than most business schools. We just recently built an entirely new facility in downtown Kitchener called the Innovation Arena. It's about 40,000 square feet to house the dozens of health and life sciences startups that are being spun out of the university every year. And just to give you a sample of what's happening at Waterloo, we now have researchers and startups, for instance, that are using AI and big data to identify and develop bespoke cancer treatments. So my wife went through breast cancer last year, had real trouble with chemo because it was the all-encompassing chemo that everyone's used to. We can use big data and AI to genetically trace the type of cancer and what it reacts to and that sort of thing, and develop drugs that will attack just those cancer cells and nothing else in your body. Like, it's game changing. Our engineering graduates have developed the world's smallest fiber optic camera, just slightly larger than a human hair. And what they do with that, they go into your brain if you're a stroke victim to find the blood clots, to locate them, and identify the type, and also to assist the surgeons in removing. Like, it's literally a high-resolution camera that looks like a human hair. It's crazy. But that's the engineering side, right? In a regular teaching hospital, a research hospital, you're gonna do a whole bunch of stuff on medicines and that sort of thing. We're gonna take the engineering side and apply it to healthcare. The spin-off called IntelliJoint has revolutionized hip and knee surgery. They have created a product that digitally scans you as a patient. There might be a couple of people in the room have to have hip surgery at some point as we get older. In the old days, what happened was they opened you up. The surgeon that day took a look at it and went, yeah, I think it's about a size large. And then they picked, one of 2 or 3 things off the shelf. And the result was usually you end up having 2 or 3 hip surgeries in your life because it didn't work well. This company digitally scans your hip before you ever even get in there, and they build a bespoke hip personally for you. And the results are basically 3-fold better than the existing technology. And just a few other things. Researchers at the University of Waterloo have figured out a way to print human bones. So you have a really bad fracture in your leg and your bone is fractured in many, many places. They're getting close to being able to print the new bone that they can just replace. They're building artificial kidneys for implants. And they're using a lot of information technology to analyze your health records and predict what's going to happen to you before you're even aware of them. And so there's a whole bunch of other things, but I've got a limited amount of time. So the other really important thing is, right now, almost all of the researchers that are affiliated with the University of Waterloo and the spin-offs, when they go to do clinical trials, they have to go to the US. They'll go to Boston, they go to Houston, they go to LA, those sorts of things. And the problem is they're often enticed to stay there and grow their companies in the US. So we want to put them on the North Campus of Waterloo and keep them here and reap all the benefits from them. So we've already decided to devote a significant amount of acreage in the North Campus to build a health innovation ecosystem where companies can start up and grow and build a health tech economy around the new hospital. So I went on a little longer than I planned, but I wanted you to I hope you can see that we're making some big plans for the future of Waterloo, even though we're facing some challenges right now from a budget point of view of that. But I will also say, it seems very, aspirational, that sort of thing, but there's been literally a couple of years of work developing comprehensive, realistic execution plans, because if there's one thing that defines the University of Waterloo, we're an institution of action and impact. We don't just sit around and think about things, we don't dream about things. We have no time for, we have all these great ideas. The way we measure success is what did we actually do and what impact did we have. And I can tell you, we have a really strong plan to make sure we make those impacts. So if you're interested in a longer summary of the strategic plan, it's called Waterloo at 100. You can either go to the University of Waterloo website and find it, or just Google University of Waterloo, Waterloo at 100, it'll pop right up. It's more of a summary document than detailed, but trust me, you don't want to read the detail, it's really deep. And finally, one last piece of good news is that since we got together last time, our last reunion, Waterloo, we've had a remarkable jump in the university world rankings. We actually moved up from about 50 places, from about 175th in the world to about 125th. That's an unprecedented jump. Like these rankings, you move 2 or 3 places a year at best. And one of the reasons it happened was the ranking agencies have started to realize that their systems weren't actually capturing the uniqueness of institutions like Waterloo. They were basing it on what an old university looked like. And I know for some of you may say, well, 125th doesn't sound that impressive, but keep in mind there's more than 10,000 universities in the world. So 125th is right up there. And when you look at the list of those that are ahead of us, there's a few names. Almost all the names are things like Harvard, Oxford, Cambridge, Stanford, MIT, et cetera, et cetera. And in most cases, these institutions have either been around for a few hundred years longer than us, or they have budgets that are somewhere between literally 10 and 50 times what ours is. So Waterloo's done a lot of great work in a short period of time with a limited amount of resources. So I'll close by saying you have a significant level of prestige in the fact that you have a University of Waterloo degree. And what I would say is, outside of this room, I promise not to bring up the fact that none of us could get into the engineering program. We will just say we have an engineering. Kevin could probably get in. But honest to God, I would probably challenge Kevin. There are some really, really brilliant young people in engineering today. And another thing I was saying at our table is we're actually under a little bit of heat from the provincial government right now because we actually turned down a few people who had 100% averages last year, because we also do interviews to see what kind of character they are, like are they well-rounded, etc., and things like that, because marks do not always tell the whole story, right? And that's always been my shtick. Like, yeah, okay, my marks were terrible, but you know, there's more than marks. Anyway, thanks for listening. That was probably a little more detailed than you needed, but it's a really special place. It's one of the reasons I kind of ridiculously give a lot of time to the institution. I see right now we're in that cusp where we go from kind of the first phase of Waterloo, you know, Waterloo 1.0 to Waterloo 2.0. There is a remarkable amount of interesting things. If there's anything I'm bitter about, is I'm probably not gonna live long enough to see really the impact. The Waterloo is literally, it's a cliche, but Waterloo is gonna literally change the world. It's really cool stuff, and you're all part of it, so that's a cool thing. So anyway, thanks for listening. Happy to answer any questions if there are any. And again, thank you, Kevin, for everything you do for the class and keeping us together. Your efforts and your patience are always appreciated. Thanks, everybody.